antagonistic than I intended to. I tried to.
We're already cap. How can somebody live free of their oppressors if their oppressors don't want to leave? Just ask that question. Wait, if Professor Flowers talks to him, do you think I could talk with Professor Flowers? Give me your Twitter.
At this point, do you know how many times I've rewatched the Professor Flowers debate?
7 times.
Over 6. Because people keep...
Do you think that I could ever use that excuse? Like when these lefties say, like, didn't you say the same thing? And I'm like, have you watched every single one of my videos? Have you seen every Destiny video?
Wait, no.
All right, good luck. Biden to unfree. Yes, we saw that. Okay, chill. Prepare for Noah to become more spineless than Lance ever was. Is that possible?
I'm not here to convince you or your audience that, like,
Noah.
If you're just
Noah, you are currently the one with nothing in your hands, arguing against evidence that hundreds of thousands of people have seen, in which she unambiguously as...
What's your workout split looking like?
Well, on Mondays, I fuck your mom. On Wednesdays, I fuck Mootin's mom. And then on Friday, I fuck them both at the same time. Sometimes for a deload. I was gonna say I fuck your sister, but she might be underage, so never mind. I fuck your mom again.
Directly as you can, said the thing you won't accept. The only thing that I can assume this is you understand that if you fall on this point, you fall on the next one.
Based, Vaush. Vaush, that was so based! Based! Bat chest! Any other bat chesters?
Okay, first off, I just want to preface this by saying I was watching a bit of the stream, and I think I definitely came off much more antagonistic than I intended to. I tried to...
We're already cap. Why would he agree to do this talk? My biggest criticism of Noah, we'll see if I maintain this in the video. My biggest criticism of Noah is, why would you agree to do this talk? Why would you agree to do this? This is why, be a video essayist and write your video essay and then don't ever talk about it to anybody. That would probably be the best bet. Because holy fuck. When we start off with like, I didn't know I didn't want to come off that I didn't want to come off that mean. I feel like we're already in really bad territory, but we'll see.
Sprinkle
because I'm putting 100%
sort of my deferential ideas about debate streaming throughout the video. Earlier on there was more, but I didn't also apply that for a lot of the analysis. So I just want to I guess up front say
sorry.
The claim that don't watch debate streams is I probably don't stand by that as a whole. That's just basically how I articulated. I don't know, it was a long video to write, so a lot of things said, but mainly I am coming here not in a manner that is to antagonize, although I think a lot of the claims we can go over, things you disagree with, but if that is worth mentioning, I guess.
Oh, no, I'm happy to talk about it. So normally I like to know how everyone comes into a discussion with disagreements, and I have a feeling about you. So I'll say what I think happened. And I can't know that I'm right. I have no way of ever knowing that I'm right. You could never confirm in a way that would, satisfy me. But the impression that I got is that you are a very empathetic person. You have strong concerns for the well-being of groups whose well-being is not generally taken into account. And when you got involved in the online left, you liked a great many people, one of whom was me, because I am... entertaining or whatever reason you did. But I am broadly very unpopular. And you...
Salient mode activated. True.
You had a very diverse audience when you got started. Not an audience with an immediate overlap with mine, because there are people who create new channels or streams that do have, just by default, a overlap with my audience, just because of the type of content they produce. The way you produce your content, I think, encourages... a much greater degree of investment from a broader group, which is great. But that broader group doesn't like me. So you became subjected immediately to criticisms for your perceived association with or approval of me. You made a subsequent video in which you pulled away from some of the more open endorsements of myself. And
Well,
in
real
the
quick, can I
subsequent-
mention, so in
Sure.
that, like, so in my follow video, yeah, I basically, I remember the quote that was used a bunch was, I was like, Vaush is good, actually. That was what I said in the initial video, right? And then in the follow-up video, well, so one of the things I remember that caused me to do that was, one of the claims that I said when discussing you in the initial video was that you had been banned from Twitch for saying fuck Israel. That was like my claim about why you had been banned. And essentially that was what you'd said, but the actual clip, you had said there would be more peace in the Middle East if Israel was wiped off the map with a nuke, which you
yes.
did say. Yeah, glass. There you go. So and so me presenting that as you saying fuck Israel was dishonest, as in, and the reason I did that was I had seen a video where you were talking about that specific, you were addressing that allegation, and you explained it in that way. You said, I said like, they don't like me because I said fuck Israel, essentially. And I could go back and like double check if that's the case. But essentially, I took that claim and repeated it. And then when people brought that clip to my attention, it was things of that nature where because I made a huge video where I was promoting like fucking, 60 people, I didn't take that into account. And so in following up, like I mentioned, I didn't really spend a lot of time on that follow-up video in articulating, but it was things like that where, like, I think accuracy is important. And so just following up by saying, don't take anything at face value, which also applies to video essayists. That's the reason why because again, it's like, I agree with the sentiment that Israel is a very bad force in the Middle East and does cause insane pain to all around them or whatever. But like the way you put it, I took issue with. So it was things like that basically caused that. It wasn't a retraction. Again, I think people, I see this from people in your audience, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but I could see like viewing things from an antagonistic lens where people either support you or they don't. And that's not like what I'm about. I don't like uncritically support anyone. I just want to point out things where I get things wrong.
I
if
understand.
That makes sense.
And it does. Obviously, if I were to detail in a full account every bad thing I've ever said on this platform, I wouldn't have room to breathe. So, the impression people are going to take from any element of my content as opposed to its full, thousands of hours, it's always going to vary. It's not the issue at hand. But I know the online left, and I also know what was going on in the comments of your initial video, as well as adjacent Twitter discourse, and also based on the way you framed things in your follow-up video. That may have been what prompted a correction, but you did get pushback because of me, and not the Israel thing either, because people on the left don't give a shit about that. They never give me shit for that. True. It was everything else. And I know this. This isn't an accusation towards you, but you were probably provided a superfluous amount of evidence to the effect that I am a horrible human. And a lot of it, I imagine you looked at and you thought, okay, well, this is maybe a bit over the top. Maybe this is a bit out of context. But you were provided a lot of it. And I think that in the subsequent months, you have walked a very fine line. And it's a line that I don't think I'm physiologically capable of walking. You've been talking to me in DMs and have been friendly and engaged and perfectly pleasant to talk to. But in a broader sense, I feel like you have been exposed to an overwhelming confluence of arguments against me. And where you are right now is in a position where you can make an hour 20-minute long.
I just want to say, I think it's really funny that I've probably talked to a dozen, 2 dozen maybe, like PhDs on my stream before. We've talked to a lot of like really educated people, or people working on PhD theses. I don't think I've ever talked to a person that uses as much vocabulary as Vaush does, ever. No educators. That's very funny to me. But just, it's not like a dig at his arguments, technically. I mean, you can talk this way. It doesn't make your arguments right or wrong, but...
video, which is mostly about me, which ends with you answering the question as to whether or not I'm racist with a, does it matter he's still doing the thing which enables white supremacy, and still talk to me in what I perceive to be an empathetic sense. I have no idea what pathological desire to make people happy and minimize harm must motivate this line that you've walked. It is incredible. I don't know how you've done it. If it was anyone else, this would be blood sports already because of the stuff that you said about me. But you are so obviously motivated by a desire to minimize harm as opposed to smear for clout, which a lot of people do, that I'm willing to have this conversation in a neutral enough tone. I'm not perfect. In spite of all of that.
Jesus.
So that's how I think you're coming into this from. You probably recognize or think of me as a person with a list of virtues and a number of vices, one of which is no doubt arrogance, and that's what's kept me from becoming aware of the many failings that I have and the harm that I cause other people. And I sincerely believe you want me to get better.
Bravo!
And that this isn't some roundabout way
believe this is called a soliloquy.
attacking me through the the perception of critique. That's a big thing on YouTube, right? The whole, oh, I'm not attacking you, I'm criticizing you, and if you don't like this criticism, that's your fault because you're being
What does use as much vocabulary mean? What I mean to imply is that Vaush has an acute predilection to utilize like when you could say something simple, small word better than big word is what I'm saying. Like I think that there is a talent to being able to convey complicated ideas with a great degree of brevity and verbosity. I think that's a word. Typically, I think just makes your point look worse every time. Like I have a lot of respect for somebody that can take a very complicated idea and make it very simple. I think that's really cool. And then things become more intuitive. Everybody can understand. Everybody's on the same page rather than like unnecessarily gatekeeping with your vocabulary, which is kind of what it feels like sometimes. Or it's like, I need to make you think I'm really smart, not because the ideas that I am conveying are profound, or not because I have a deeper, good understanding of something. Is that a bug? But because I'm using really big words. I mean, that's just my approach to it. Fuck it.
receptive. Usually it's just an optical ploy. I don't think you're doing that. So let's talk then. And I apologize for the preamble, but I know people in my audience are going to expect more vitriol from me. And I wanted to explain, if to no one else, to them, why I don't feel the need to do that.
Jesus.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. I would just add, sorry, I completely forgot what I was about to say. Give me 3 seconds to think.
Not at all.
Write it down. Why does every streamer have these big glass
my goal
or
being
big
empathy.
water
So-
things? What the
or
fuck?
my sort of motivation being empathy. And I think that the reason I've tried to sort of toe that line is because I do believe a lot of what you do is really good. And this is a point I didn't, really flesh out in the video very much at all. But in terms of as a force of content, like most of what I said in the original video, I still stand by. But you're right.
Wait, are you
that,
leaving?
like having so much talked about. And
Wait,
how
what?
Many, so many.
Oh, okay. You don't want to go to the gym with me tonight. Okay, that's fine. You don't want to go to the gym with me tonight. That's okay. Fine. Be careful.
Things offloaded onto you as at once creates this overwhelming pressure of like, okay, how do I address these things that I do see that I take issues with? Like, we can talk about the Professor Flower stuff. I take an issue with a lot of that, and I disagree with a lot of it. These
I don't know if it's everybody, but when I eat like a bunch of fucking trash, like pizza, whatever shit, if I wait like 2 or 3 hours, I feel like a fucking monster. I feel very strong. But that's just me. I don't know.
Characterizations. How do I take that in stride and say, like the comment you mentioned where I said, like, is he a racist? Yes or no? I mean, white supremacy operates at different levels, and me, that question isn't meant to I guess, okay, it could be seen as an inference that you are a racist guy, but it's like these things are more complicated than yes or no, and that's the point I'm trying to make there. But I mean, we can go through the video or whatever, but at the end of the day, it is just from a pure standpoint of trying to improve the space, and whether or not that means whatever that entails, that's my primary goal. So just to kind of add on to what you said, but go ahead.
It's also something that I want, as much fun as it is to argue with people like Professor Flowers, though keep in mind, like, I never expect these conversations to blow up the way they do. usually ready for an amicable conversation. The drive behind all of it is that I want to make the online left better. I think the online left is driven in large part by an unwillingness to engage in and be receptive towards
Jesus
conflict,
fucking
and also by a kind of ideological weakness, an inability to reconcile their perspectives with outside criticisms, a desire to turn inward. The right doesn't have this issue because being wrong doesn't stop them, and they're not concerned with being consistent from point to point. You know, they can. It's like a Tolkien's orcs, right? You know, you don't need to have proper plumbing infrastructure built in their towns. They don't give a fuck. It's not necessary for their stability. We, on the other hand, unfortunately, are bound by some constraints. The benefits that we have, of course, is that we're right. That's a pretty big one. But in terms of the downsides, there is a lot of echo chambering. I think, for the most part, when I have these conversations with people like Professor Flowers, I'm always hoping that they'll have a come to Jesus moment, that, you know,
They realize I'm right about
they'll
everything.
reflect on their wrongdoing and they'll arrive at some understanding.
exactly
They don't
what
have to
I'm saying.
like me. Yeah, I know you
So
exhale,
what
but
was the wrongdoing in that regard? The wrongdoing of the claim that about white racial essentialization, or in that specific case, I'm curious.
she made a few mistakes. Though keep in mind, your whole video was an attempt to instill, sort of by proxy, a come to Jesus in me. Obviously, your video was directed at people who are watching the video. It's not a claim made directly at me, but that is the goal then, as you acknowledge the belief that people can change. And I imagine it must come across as incredibly conceited for me to say, you know, oh, look at these 48 people, minorities on the left who disagree with me. I can't wait for them all to shape up. But, you know, stranger things have happened. That's why I like to take it point by point. With Professor Flowers, the essentialization thing in particular was pretty bad. Likewise, she was giving leeway to ethnic cleansing. Now, you know, if she had just acknowledged that, we could have argued about how, you know, sometimes in times of great need, you know, you might be able to justify this, that, the other. But she wouldn't own up to it, which was really frustrating.
I think, like, that's where I disagree, is that, you know, it's sprinkled throughout that conversation where she said that that's not something that people are considering. But the question that was being posed by you was, you know, if they did this, if they decided to do this, what would you say to that? And it's not that
Wait, is Twitter like going crazy right now, or what's? Oh, okay, never mind. I saw somebody saying something in chat. Never mind. Okay.
question is the wrong question to ask. It's that she at no point suggested that was going to happen, and that was something that was happening. And to view the idea, the simple claim, like the simple claim of colonized people should be able to decide. It's not about whether or not it's moral or ethical to make the decision to kill their oppressors. That type of extreme is the problem, because it is a very kind of baseline claim about autonomy that I don't think you disagree with, but I think in your pursuit of I don't really know. I guess for you it is to nail down the ethical. What's the word? To nail.
The people of South Africa should be able to shoot their homosexuals and bury them in a...
I know I've heard this argument. I no, that's again that doesn't apply to what I'm saying here.
Wait, hold on. You're
Hold on.
making
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
autonomy argument.
Whoa.
Now, I recognize that an autonomous nation state will have the ability to commit ethnic cleansing, but in practice, we never ever talk about the right to do a thing in the context of whether they have the national sovereignty to do so. A nation with autonomy will be able to people. That's a thing they can do as a product of national autonomy. But no leftist in their right mind would go, well, I do think actually that America should have the right to like all their gay people because, you know, America's a sovereign nation and that's part of a sovereign nation. Like, we wouldn't talk about it that way. The issue I have is Professor Flowers was saying that colonized people, by which she meant black people, should have the right to decide whether to live with their oppressors. And given it was the context of South Africa, that would be white people. And in following qualifications, you know, she's essentially said that what I'm about to infer is correct, but when you're talking about choosing to live with on the context of a nation state, we're talking about group or deporting them, and either meet the definition of an.
Whoa.
Yeah, again, I just disagree that at the level of conversation that was being had, that was something that was even a part of, like, I mean, again, so this is conversation at two different levels, right? In debate, you are pushing to the limits to test like what this all means, what is the implication of what she's saying here. But I don't think that, like, your insinuation of this, again, like, you can go throughout the thing. There's no point. There are multiple points where she says that, this is not something that people want to do. This is not something that people are planning on doing. But so this continued characterization that
I think her ethical system.
You think that Professor Flower wants to?
I think that Professor Flowers is a believer in a system by which you can justify ethnic against white people. I don't think the people in South Africa want it. Well, I'm sure some do. There are millions of people there, but I don't think this is like an issue with indigenous communities. I don't believe in the fear of retribution. I think that overwhelmingly any indigenous community is just going to want to reestablish some sort of presence on their land, some political and economic autonomy. Varies, of course, depending on where you are. But this is leeway I don't think you or anyone would give anyone else. The right to decide. Now, it's true she said, I don't want genocide, I don't want this, I don't want that, but I've argued with a lot of right-leaning people
Say the
who
same
will
thing.
shy away from the term we have for bad things, but then justify the bad things through other terminology. It's really common, and it's why they get mad at me for asking them qualifying questions, because they feel like I'm trying to trick them into defending, say, for example, the of Latin Americans who come up from the border, when that's explicitly what they want, but they don't like the term ethnic. They don't like it because light's being shown on positions they'd rather leave to implication. In Professor Flowers' case, it wasn't very implicit. It was pretty explicit. And I feel like we can acknowledge that Professor Flowers indeed endorsed, or at the very least held water for ethnic without sacrificing any real talking points concerning decolonization. Because that's not decolonization. That's like very, very out there. It's not. That doesn't have anything to do with the actual like political, talking points, right?
Yeah. So I just disagree with that claim that is what, like, the ideology. And again, like, so I've watched all of her videos and the full debate. I've watched everything multiple times, and I don't see how anyone would come to that conclusion. I think what's being valued here is the moments in the debate where you got that impression.
Why not just ask I don't know if Vaush will get to this. Why not just ask this question, okay? Hold on. How can somebody live free of their oppressors if their oppressors don't want to leave? Just ask that question. Fuck it. And then we'll see what the answer is. Because that's the same issue that I always get into with like white nationalists who will say like, oh, well, we support like the peaceful deportation of all people of color. Okay, well, what if they don't want to be peacefully deported? Eventually, push comes to shove. All right, we're gonna need like a rumbling or a euthanasia or whatever. Something is going to have to happen to get rid of all these people, right?
I don't think that's what she was ever saying. And I think even to, like, again, I see the perspective of you are trying to, like, again, it's like an optical thing. It's right. Like Republican fear-mongering of CRT is where black people want to kill everybody. So I'm trying to investigate that claim. But again, that, like, I think you came in with that framing or with that, not intent, but you were primed to interpret what she was saying in that manner, and so many other people interpreted in a totally different way, in a way that I find correct, which is that these types of things can't be compared, like decolonization and Nazism can't be compared. There's no point of comparison, and even to like make that equivocation again, like you're saying, like,
but then you got to say why. You can't just like, you can't do that. You can't compare them. They're not. Like that's such a bat chest argument. He's like, these aren't comparable. Well, why not? Okay, well, what's not comparable? You should be able to explain why not then, right?
Right wingers say these things. They come in, they try and like hide their intentions. I think you viewed and sometimes do view these conversations as a one-to-one comparison.
Oh,
in
I get it,
rhetoric, but
Anthony.
it's
Never
not
mind.
the case when there's
Fuck you.
more history and there's more like with regards to what these claims actually mean, and with regards to what acknowledging the claim that historical oppression is different in a very serious manner from white people to black people.
We're talking about different points. I have never at any point on my platform said that the harm done along both these lines is equatable in both directions. This is something
Right,
that
I know
other
you
people
have.
right. So here I'll ask you, do you think the black Israelites are a little bit like Nazis?
I literally don't know, like, again, little bit in what way? Like,
Luis Farrakhan, are you more familiar with his political prescriptions?
yeah.
Right. Once an ethno-state, hates Jews, homosexuals, believes that his race is the master race, that he has, an ancestral genetic connection to essentially a superior group of people.
I see the comparison. I see the comparison you're making, and I in the context of the conversation you had, I don't see how that could be justified.
The critical
again,
difference
like you're
here,
making a comparison between things that they're just different. Like they're just different things, and I don't.
They are different. That's what a comparison is. A comparison takes two different things and it compares them. That's why it's called a comparison. Why do people keep saying this? Bro, you can't compare those two things. They're different. If they were the same, then I wouldn't have anything to compare. It would just be... Oh, fuck. Why? How are these guys like in their fucking base all day? Oh my god, dude. This mushroom shit is so fucking AIDS. Cake, I need you to delete the files with this stupid... Oh, did I just get stuck? Does this thing need fuel to run? Stop eating berries. They don't give health. Yeah, I noticed that. The easiest way to get health and food is usually just picking a fuck ton of mushrooms, though, without having to, like, cook food. It does need fuel. You know what? I got fuel.
Have to be made between different things. The point is to illustrate similarities.
True.
So with Luis Farrakhan, I have noted, of course, the fact that he is not white, and therefore his ideology is not identical to those of Nazis. But it is essentially Blotzy ideology, black Nazi ideology. It's very
Is that a Vaush
similar.
term?
They clearly crib notes. And I think that it's fair to make that comparison, even though the Nazis, of course, were a monstrous political machine that killed tens of millions and continue to this day in their subsequent forms hurt people. Whereas the Luis Farrakhan Black Israelite type, I mean, it's not good, but it's much less of a problem. But the comparison illustrates similarities. So the similarity I was trying to draw upon with Professor Flowers was the use of perceived victimhood as an excuse to justify retaliatory violence against a racial group, and B, the essentialization of behavior from people in a racial group to the race in its entirety. Because both of those were necessary for non-ideology. It's not sufficient. This was one of the things that I had with non-compete as well. You don't just need certain sets of facts in order to be a Nazi. You could believe all the propaganda the Nazis believed and still not be a Nazi, because you can derive better moral positions from that misinformation you've been given. But if you're capable of racial essentialization, which Professor Flowers and you
breaking these barrels?
do, you have the ability then to extrapolate much greater kinds of harm, because now, you can reduce, this group of people did this thing. Well, now this entire race is on the bill. White people were colonizers in South Africa hundreds of years ago, and, very complicated history up till this point. Well, now all the millions of white people in South Africa are colonizers, which I thought as a term referred to like people engaging in the process, homesteading, soldiers, farmers brought from, Netherlands, whatever, like an active thing. But if we're just using it to refer to any group of people who complicit in the exploitation of others, Professor Flowers would be a colonizer because we colonized America from the Native Americans, a group to which she does not belong. She may not be the predominant power group
Oh my
in
God, the
America, but
monologuing.
she sure as shit is not indigenous. This is very reductive logic. It doesn't serve any purpose other than to give people a framework from which to attack racial groups they don't like, which is why I think it's really important to fight back against it. That was the comparison I drew.
Jesus.
Okay, so
Hello.
I guess to that I would just say, you called it reductive to call white people in South Africa colonizers, and I think that's fair. And like the actual utility of that, what does that bring? Not much. But also, I don't think that really it doesn't strike to the heart of, or that doesn't really
Wait, what?
address what colonization is, and to sort of fixate on that aspect of using that term in a way, which I don't think she ever. Again, I don't think like there were these prescriptive claims that you've drawn out from that conversation that said that this stuff was like okay, or that it was something that is encouraged. It's just a simple case of like colonization primarily happened from Europe, primarily obviously in South Africa. The South Africans there are descendants, a lot of them, and I don't think like. I think the conversation about what colonization is missed when the steps are taken forward into, well, using that rhetoric is, shaky because it leads to potentially justifying XYZ. I think that conversation before is more important. But again, it's not to say the conversation after shouldn't happen. But I think that conversation before, I find to be the more important one, and I find that it is missed when
Who's been the most bat-chesting conversation? I don't know. This is really boring. I don't know what we're doing right now. I don't know where we're.
the claims are pursued about, ethnic. What does this mean if you're calling white people colonizers and you can kick them out? It means you can kill them all. It's like that's not what's being talked about.
Well,
but
one step always leads to the next, right? I mean, for
well,
example,
it's kind of like a slippery slope thing, right? In terms of like, if it depends on what level you're having the conversation, right? Like if you're talking about, if you're having like a philosophical conversation about what all of this means for the future, then yes, you could talk about it at that level, but I don't think that's what she was saying. And again, this kind of sounds like we're just going over this conversation in a manner that like it's already been gone over. But
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying in that regard? Like in terms of where the conversation is missed.
look, I don't have an issue with people jokingly calling whites colonizers or whatever. But when it's being done in the context of a discussion about state power being used to displace millions of people, we're very clearly tying this to systems through which real harm can be done. Like, I can give you another example. What does a gangbanger look like? In your head, just picture something. If you were to take
what's going on? What are we doing here?
nothing that you don't disagree with. Have you ever watched
Okay.
Fox News?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Have you
Every
ever?
night actually.
Oh, there you go. Have you ever, while spending time online, been assailed with any crime statistics in relationship to race? I know I did.
So
Stormfront used
1350.
to. Oh, right, the
or what
whole
are we-
thing. Right. Yeah. No, wait. I don't know. We sigh like I'm not on your side on this one. Do you know how many debates I've had where I argue that there's no inherent difference between people of any racial group? This is all treading ground. I'm making sure we have the same basic framework here. The issue is, if you were to take that information and then to say, in the essential sense, what does a gang member in the United States look like? A lot of people, based either on their biases or on data that you could draw, they would come up with a person of color. And the issue, of course, isn't acknowledging the idea that there are disproportionate trends, how oppression relates to race and how race relates to crime and oppression and how income relates to all of these things. Acknowledging them is just part of getting a sociology degree. But, of course, if your logic is as simple as this group mostly does X, therefore it's okay to say this group is this thing, that's how you get all of the essentialist logic that racists have been using since essentially the drug war to frame black people's disproportionate criminality as some kind of essentialist problem, as opposed to what it actually is, which is a deliberate product of government failing them and putting them in situations where there was essentially no economic opportunity. The essentialism was what led to the issue there. Now, you can acknowledge stuff like, White people have been colonizers throughout history, or at least the past couple, like 500 years or so. Yeah, but yeah, of course. But we are talking about using state power to remove people from a country. If you have an alternate explanation for her line there, colonizers should have a right.
All right, back to your regularly scheduled program.
The colonized should have a right to decide whether or not they want to live with their oppressors. Can you explain that line to me in a way that isn't ethnicizing, given she has explicitly said her definition of colonizer is white person? She said that with me and also with him.
I don't think I disagree with that claim. That her claim is that colonizers equals white person. I don't
she
think
explicitly said that with him. It's not inference. She has said
I've
that
seen the
directly.
Hume. No, I've seen the Hume debate. I've seen the full debate. That's not the claim, and that's not. Again, it depends on where and what you're talking about. But
she's tweeted it as well.
To draw this,
and you said it in your video. You said it in your video. You said you did the thing. It was like a big meme. You were like, he criticizes her for saying this is an essentialist thing for white people, and then you're like, well, isn't it kind of? And then
True.
This is wait. For both of our sakes, unless you want to get assailed with clips proving you wrong.
Jesus.
Accept this point and move forward. Upon the presumption that she believes white people equals colonizer, how do you frame what she said? What
again,
what
like
would
this,
it take
we're
to
talking
convince
about.
you?
We're talking about, like, I've looked through it all. I flatly disagree, and this is why I don't think we're gonna find agreement. It's this type of one step leads to the next step leads to the next step. What the net result of that is online is people tweeting at her, calling her pro-genocide, and that's not, like, again, this is objectively not what she was ever saying. This is not what she was saying, and like, I know.
Wow, thanks, Lewis. I love you too, buddy.
You got that impression from the debate and the debate that you watched.
I think, Lewis, the two biggest issues when it comes to talking about business owners in the United States is a fundamental misunderstanding of how businesses operate, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a business owner looks like. I think the problem is, one, people think that businesses just sit on huge piles of cash all the time, and then when they're feeling nice, they'll like give it to employees. But otherwise, businesses are just these greedy, hoarding entities that have infinite amounts of revenue. Their profit margins are like 70% probably on every product, right? Oh, there was a really good, it might have been an NBER poll or survey. There was a study where it's like, if you ask the average American, like, what do you think the profit margin of a business is? They always get it like 4 or 5 times higher than what it actually is. Like, I think the average American thinks the profit margin of a business is like 35, 40% or something. That's the first huge misunderstanding, that like businesses aren't like massively profitable entities that just sit on all these piles of money. And then the second thing is that the average business owner in the United States is probably a guy that makes anywhere from 50 to 150,000 a year, and he probably works like 80 to 100 hours a week if you're a small business owner. People think that when they think like business owner, they think, oh, like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, right? When the reality is that not only does a small business owner probably know every single job in his particular small business, he probably works like 1 or 2 or 3 of them so that he doesn't have to hire another employee because he doesn't have the money to do it. But yeah, I don't know. It's stupid. Okay, sorry. Back to the bat chest.
With him, and you could pull up clips and tweets or whatever, but like, this is just, I don't see this going anywhere, because I think, like,
are you capable of being moved on this position? Because it seems like you're actually the one with the preconception that you're not allowing to be moved by evidence.
No, well, what evidence is that you're telling me what she said here? Like, I've seen the whole thing. It's not gonna, like, you saying that she said this here and there.
I didn't say she said it.
No, I'm saying, like, you right now telling me that she said this.
One moment.
And you can pull up the tweet about white people being colonizers or whatever. Like
that structure was
that's
literally created to benefit the white people who are colonizing it. It's not out of character.
The logical thought then leads to,
a misrepresentation to say that this is an issue of white people colonizing people. And I can't believe this whole debate
people getting mad at her for calling white people colonizer or whatever, or equivocating white people with colonizer. Again, it's like the history of colonization is pretty like simplistic in that regard, and that doesn't mean like I'm saying it's okay. I'm just saying, like, I don't like this continued comparison and characterization, and this is why I don't think, like, we're gonna. I just fundamentally disagree. And
just a moment, please. Just one moment.
It's like such tough questions to ask, right?
I think it's like white.
Oh, your video. Oh, you're back. Sorry.
I think it's like white
again,
in
like
passing,
you can pull
where
up
it's like if you can
whatever
get like the
clips
full benefits
you
of
feel
white
present that,
supremacy
but
and not have to face
if
the oppressions of white
if you've watched her
supremacy,
videos,
for me, that's when
you've,
I'd be like
listen to her.
you know,
That's
calling
that's
you a
not
colonizer.
that's not what she was saying. And
Noah, just one moment, please.
If you're looking for clips, that's fine.
We're not looking. We're listening. Just a moment.
Oh. Wait, what are you
I don't
listening?
see that as an academic term. I just say that like you're benefiting off of colonialism. That's what I mean by that. And maybe I should use something else because it's very confusing to people. But at the same time, I'm not really interested in like breaking it down.
Don't you
people either?
Sure. Haven't you? And again, I don't know what your upbringing is like or whatever, but I know that
What did we just listen to? Wait, if Professor Flowers talks to him, do you think I could talk with Professor Flowers? Give me her Twitter. We can bridge the gap. Is she actually a professor, or is that just like her online name? This is her. She dipped from the heme debate. I don't want to have a debate. I just want to have a discussion. Isn't that what we're supposed to say when we want to be non-confrontational? Oh shit, she already has me blocked on Twitter. Okay, never mind. Okay, I'll do this, and we'll see if we get any traction. Boom.
When she tweeted, you literally equated colonizer with white in multiple streams. This is genuinely so funny to me that you want me to be ashamed about this. How am I meant to take this apart from she uses them interchangeably, along with the multiple clips of her using them interchangeably? And then when asked to clarify, saying that, yeah, she thinks they're like the same.
I look, you can like pull a tweet that says that, and you can pull clips that allude to, again, a complex conversation about race, whiteness, and colonization.
Can you find any
and
evidence of her saying that it's not, that this isn't a synchronous?
I mean, have you like watched all of her videos back?
Have you watched? It's the Jordan Peterson defense. Have you watched every single video? Jesus Christ. Do you think that I could ever use that excuse? Like when these lefties say, like, didn't you say this to me thing? And I'm like, have you watched every single one of my videos? Have you seen every Destiny video? Is it really fair for you to say that you haven't watched every single one of my videos? Bro, I would get fucking crucified if I were to ever use an excuse like that. Have you seen all of my videos?
Not sure if you have.
No, I don't think she's very smart.
Okay, well then this is just a waste of time, like to try to convince you. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to convince you or your audience that, like.
Wait, Noah.
If you're just
Noah. You are currently the one with nothing in your hands, arguing against evidence that hundreds of thousands of people have seen.
Say millions.
She unambiguously, as directly as you can, said the thing you won't accept. The only thing that I can assume this is,
one,
apart from maybe you two are like secret best buddies or something, and it's like a personal thing, is you understand that if you fall on this point, you fall on the next one. I am, because this is an enormous waste of time, just going to rip the L from your hands.
Rip the L from his hands. Vaush, rip
she
it.
said what she said. She thinks white people are colonizers. If you are, with respect, too spineless to own up to the fact that she clearly... No,
dude, this is...
Wait,
like,
Noah.
Vaush bringing out the big debate, bro.
This is the problem I have. I get framed as a bully when a person is behind me screaming and dancing a point, and I point at it and say, that's fucked. And then people tell me that it's not even there. It is insane. In this respect, you know, we can move forward. You can say, I don't care. You know what? Maybe Professor Flowers is a genocide or whatever, like an ethnic supporter. If she had owned it, I wouldn't have cared so much. The thing that bothers me is when I have to run this dishonesty cycle where people gaslight the shit out of me. At this point, do you know how many times I've rewatched the Professor Flowers debate?
7 times.
Over 6. Because people keep talking about some other second debate
Vaush,
that never happened.
That's a fucking lie, but that's still funny.
Apparently I was a part of. I am told that I said racist stuff, and I look back and no. And I'm told that she said this thing that owned me, and I look back and no. I keep going it over and over, and it legitimately fucks with me. Because all the things I thought I said happened. And all the things I thought she said happened. Every time. But people don't want to believe that. Because it would be big bad Vaush. The narrative crumbles. If they were lying. If I was right. We never can overcome this. If this is the standard of evidence that I have to provide, I assume brainwaves from her to you to convey the fact that she doesn't think of this as some kind of essentialist thing. You know,
brainwaves.
I can't meet that evidence, but if you want to provide, then I ask you, when she talked about the right to live away from your oppressors, who was she referring to? In South Africa.
Jesus.
We'll ignore what she said because she said white people. So we'll invalidate her.
This is where like I think this conversation isn't going to glean anything more, because you are asking to use these claims that, again, I just fundamentally disagree in the debate with these claims that you're pulling from them, that she somehow promoted genocide against white people by the colonized, when her point was just that autonomy should be granted, it shouldn't be conditional. And like, look, I
nobody said otherwise. But you can believe that you should give autonomy to people, but then also say you shouldn't do ethnicity. Those are the fact that there's been an effort.
And that's
to
what she said, dude. That's
points.
what that's literally what she said in her videos and multiple times in the debate.
She did say she doesn't like ethnic, but, and I can tell because I've debated a lot of conservatives, they often lie or misrepresent their own positions as a way of avoiding the most severe condemnations they could possibly receive if they were forthcoming. How many conservatives have I talked to who clearly fucking hate Martin Luther King, but can't own up to it because he's a national hero? How many convos have I had where they clearly just don't want gay people to exist or trans people to exist, but it's always being framed as some like, well, let's wait on the science thing? If you think dishonesty is exclusively a conservative point of contention, then, well, it's just a thing people can do. With her, with Professor Flowers, we can move on if you like. Lord knows there's more to talk about. But
Lord knows.
In
Lordy
this specific respect, I do not feel like I am engaging in motivated reasoning. She said, I was about to say all but said, but she actually said, colonizers are white people are colonizers. So the essentialist tie has been drawn. Nobody here was talking about denying South African black people autonomy. Nobody ever said that. I certainly never said that. I just don't think you should be able to displace broader racial groups.
And again, she doesn't think that either. So if you disagree with that point, that's fine. But we should just move on, because that's not the content of her statements. Like, you can extrapolate it through tweets and like
I feel like you have to extrapolate though. Like you're the one who actually has to do like the decoding to arrive at your more charitable interpretation.
By like watching her videos and listening to what she's saying. If that's what decoding and extrapolating is, then yeah, I mean
watch all of her videos, Vaush.
But again, I don't think that you have honestly engaged with this issue in that regard.
Do you think
so? Like, we should just move on.
By chance,
dude. Like, this is the type of stuff. Like,
just answer the question. Yeah, just answer the fucking question.
I mean, yeah, of course. So what?
I've watched his content.
He never says
self-refers as one.
Never.
All right, so
I don't even know if Tucker Carlson ever uses. Does he talk about white people, or does he just talk about traditional Western values? Does Tucker Carlson ever explicitly refer to like the need to protect white people, or is it just traditional Americans or Western culture or American culture? Or the proud traditional, like, I maybe he has and I just haven't seen it, but like,
what process could you infer that he is a white nationalist without him actually saying that he is one?
So you're saying that the rhetoric is conducive to...
I'm asking you a question about how you could infer that assumption. I believe he's a white nationalist. but he's never said it. So how would you?
I think looking at, so I understand what Vaush is trying to do, because I think this is what I would try to do in a conversation. Okay, you're saying Professor Flowers isn't a separatist or whatever, or isn't advocating or could be advocating for genocide because she hasn't explicitly said it. Well, let's run this. Hold on. Same thought process down with another.
By what process would you arrive at that conclusion?
I mean, like the rhetoric he uses, right? Like the
rhetoric
white
he
genocide
uses?
rhetoric, right? So going on and talking about
Through the cloth.
fear mongering about white people being replaced. And so I'm not saying you can't infer what people say from the rhetoric they use. I'm saying if you are inferring from the rhetoric someone uses in a debate that was obviously not a productive source of information, and you're ignoring the plethora of evidence and information given in her videos, then that's just dishonest, and that's not actually if
would it be dishonest
I don't even know
to ignore the times when Tucker Carlson has said he's not racist? I'm sure he said that quite a few times, right? He's had a long career.
So Professor Flowers' videos were her saying she's not racist?
Well, Professor Flowers has talked about how she doesn't believe in genocide or ethnic cleansing, but the things she said were advocacies for genocide or ethnic
I think, and I could be wrong, but when Noah is giving these exasperated sighs, he's trying to make it sound like, oh, this is so ridiculous. We shouldn't have to deal with it. But I don't think that's what it is. I think it's actually frustration because he realizes he's absolutely dead wrong on the point. I think that's what's happening. He's like, fuck me, dude. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to move on. I think that the rhetorically, it's trying to give the appearance of like, come on, this is so stupid, Vaush. But what's actually happening is there's a deep sense of frustration because he knows he's like totally incorrect on this point. He's just making an absurd argument that if I don't have a video with Professor Flowers saying, I hate white people and want to kill them all, well, if you can't find that, you can't say she advocates for any type of genocide, right? Good job. Dino's killing frogs. That's what I like to see. You're doing God's work. Keep up. Good job, Dino.
cleansing. I think I've even seen a video of her in the Cope stream after the non-compete thing, where she essentially said that like she didn't think it was ethnic to move a race of people. I wish I had all these at my disposal, but you know, as you're aware, the editing process can take some time to conjure together. But you know, it's fine. It's fine. There's always other stuff. I have to admit, it does feel a little bit strange that an opposition to ethnic is something which seems to get me derision in a space that is ostensibly left-leaning, but that's fine. We disagree in the particulars. So I have to ask, you know, it's always sort of Professor Flowers oriented aside, I guess. When we talk about like harassment from my community, or I guess I should say, what do you imagine could be done to make the online left less vitriolic?
What could be done?
You talked about a lot of harassment coming from my community. Obviously, I disagree with the severity or even existence of that harassment, but it's possible we have different definitions.
I think a lot of it has to do with the framing of these issues, and so I think a big portion of it is like debate stream and debate streamers, and I mean just live streaming in general is kind of its own ecosystem, it's its own world, and the intermediary from debate streams to, like, let's say just the other side, essayists or what have you, is Twitter, and that's just obviously a problem. That's always going to be a problem. So I think like in the case of like the examples I show in my video, I think like again, I don't really know what to say, because if these are the characterizations you're okay with making, and if you're okay with people, like you said, being mean to people that disagree with you, which is something that, I mean, that's a claim I'm assuming you stand by.
Of course. God willing. God bless.
Yeah, look, I guess just like, I don't really know what I'm trying to say here. Let me take a step back and think.
What do you define as harassment, I guess, is what I'm curious about. Because the screenshots that you showed were comments in reply to my videos, for the most part, where people just seemed to think Professor Flowers supported ethnic cleansing, which is, as far as I'm concerned, objectively and provably correct. So you can't believe it's harassment to point out bad belief. Like that would be like saying it's harassment. Your video is harassment against me because you accuse me of engaging in upholding white supremacy, right? Like at that point, every criticism is harassment.
Yeah. So I guess it's like if a premise, which I believe to be false, and which I think, given the content of what she's done, is, I think, provably false. Again, you say it's provably false because of what she said in the debate. I say it's provably false because of what she said in her videos. That's not going to ever change. But I think like the nature of this harassment isn't I don't think it's acknowledged as being. I think there's a difference in the types of harassment that happen. Like you could say like, oh, they are harassing for XYZ reason. Like if there's outright racist vitriol.
Holy fuck, this is spawn. I'll be right back. Hold on 1 second. Tell me if I missed anything. Hold on.
Vitriol, which like you've said, like when that happens in your community, you ban people, and when people do it, they can do it like vitriolic shit. Like none of that is good. I don't want any of that. But I don't think using that, like I see what you mean about these things not being like one being more important to call out than the other. But I don't think that necessarily. I don't think it follows that means like the type of stuff that I'm talking about is necessarily false. Do you know what I mean? I think like we can look at things like what happened to Professor Flowers and say like that is objectively bad, while also saying we shouldn't, people shouldn't treat you the way they've treated you in those examples you've just brought up. I think both
type of
they're not the same thing. They're not. I agree. I totally agree. But I'm saying like if we're using one of those.
Destiny, Vaush faced harassment and his community calls out about political takes. That's what you missed. Wow, cool, thanks.
To just completely like ignore the problems in the other, then that's not conducive to like an inclusive space.
It would need to be demonstrated that it is indeed a problem. I think it's important, and you do too, judging from the video that you made and I watched, to curtail bad behavior on the left. I mean, what is a video of yours if not...
Did Destiny add a bunch more mods here recently? I don't know where my YouTube mods come from. I don't know who adds them. I don't know if it's August or someone else. They just kind of show up and they do their thing, okay? Be nice to them.
An invitation to your audience to regard with derision people like me. That's not a bad thing, by the way. We all cultivate the garden. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how political and social movements keep things together, But in this case, Professor Flowers is a ludicrously obvious example of a dead branch in terms of what should or should not be allowed in the left. And for the harassment she's received, what? People say...
Oh, quick break! For an almost gym-related question. How accurate is Fitbit for determining how many calories you've burned a day? If I weigh 170 pounds on my gym days and on my 10,000 step days, it says I'm burning 2,850 calories a day. Does that sound accurate? It seems a little high, but I have no idea. What do we think, chat? Okay. Sorry, back to this ultra-entertaining debate.
That she said the things she said? Do I see death threats? Real harassment? Threats? Sexist or racist accusations? I'm sure some have happened just as a product of the size of my community.
Probably includes BMR? Of course it does.
And bring those screenshots to me, I'll ban those people. But whenever evidence is brought to me, it's just people telling her that she's bad for saying the things that she said directly to me, and then again on Twitter, and then again with him, and then again on other panels, and then again on her own podcast. It's not... What am I, to turn a blind eye to this? If we care about introspection, you have to give me more than Professor Flowers didn't say the things she said because she said other things that weren't the things she said. I need more than that. Should I not? Should I take everyone then at their word? Every criticism. Mel, the genocider, is this a person for whom I must hold water? Luna Oy, a nationalist. I mean, where does that line stop? It seems to stop a lot farther out with minority groups than it does with white people. It's a concern that I've noticed, and if you I'm sure understand from your presence in the online left that there is often a performative, what would you call it? A performative giving of space to minority groups. Not to say it's not good to do that, but a performative one which is about, virtue signaling, essentially. I think it's an issue because it means those people are being held to a lower standard with regards to the quality of their perspectives, when all of us, of course, should be subject to criticism for the things that we say. And then the
I
blowback.
think, like,
Jesus
just to
Christ.
speak to that, I agree that like there's a certain degree of performative, like you said, virtue signaling. I remember like during BLM in summer of 2020, I saw like a lot of things that was like it was like sort of empty sort of performative white wokeness. Sure, that's definitely something that happens, but I don't see that as necessitating the completely ignoring the bad things that do happen to racialized creators. And I think like the overstep there, or the what gets missed there, is the things that do happen in subject of, well, like, you know, this person is only defending you. Like, I mean, I showed it in my tweets, like I'm pointing out like things that I feel are objectively bad, and then people are immediately jumping to the claim that, oh, you're only doing this because this is a person of color. And it's like that if that conclusion is being drawn before actually like taking a second to reflect on what is being done that potentially could be perceived as harassment, I take issue with that, and like this framing that, you know, oh, well, minorities on the left are being protected by the, you know, people who have like these white woke fantasies or whatever. Again, we operate in different spaces, so I assume you probably see more of that than I do. I'm sure that's the case, but I do take issue with that being the initial claim on things where people are calling out like things they perceive to be bad behavior against minorities, and then the immediate jump is, well, you're only saying that because they're a person of color. Like, do you see an issue with that at all?
Well, if it was unwarranted, but then why is it that the conversation between myself and Professor Flowers is always supposed to be like a white guy talking down to a black woman? That's how everyone talks about it. Pardon me for my liberal color blindness, but I feel like no matter what a person's race is, they have a ability to speak on an issue with an equal degree of potential quality. And we were both talking about indigenous issues, which neither of us are, so it wasn't even really relevant to that. It seemed odd to me. This was framed constantly. You talked about two white guys debating, you know, this, that, the other, white gender on stream. It's always framed that way. The id pull is always lurking. And I know one of the biggest criticisms that I get, which is part of like a broad package of criticisms, is that I am, and you said this, sort of an archetype of left.
Of being a Destiny cum guzzler and looking similar. What are we talking about? If Destiny sat in a tan bed for a week and did a stream, could you distinguish him from Irrelevant? They are both fat, but Booksmarts is fat. Wait, is Irrelevant fat? I thought he was like a stick. What does this comment? How does this have 5 upvotes? What is even happening here? What the fuck?
Adjacent white that my political positions might be progressive. Some people deny even that, but even though they are, I still maintain the chauvinistic perspective of a person who is held by the trappings of white supremacy. Now, I don't think my behavior warrants this. I think my skin tone is what warrants it. Because I don't think my behavior corresponds to this assumption at all. And I see all these defenses that get brought out for people who I consider indefensible. I won't speak of Professor Flowers again here, but like, my God. And this isn't the biggest issue in the world, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly worth considering, especially if it's leading us to arrive at really bad political positions. I don't know what utility we get from Professor Flowers' analysis that I wasn't casually bumping off on my stream before I even knew who she was. But there's a lot of vitriol that she can provide that I can't. I know that much.
I mean, yeah, so to the idea that like everyone should be held to the same standard of harassment and vitriol, I totally agree. I can't like speak to any of the earlier claims to that, like what you mentioned, but I maintain that like the perception of what is and isn't idpol seems to be like so kind of embedded to the point where, like I said, that's the first reaction to criticism against people that are like perceived to be harming people of color, and that's just what I take issue with.
It's a narrative. I mean, of course, one of the biggest criticisms that I get is like I'm a white debate bro. So it's a narrative that's supported by the explicit text of the people I'm accusing of being a part of that narrative. But yeah, of course, we're talking off inference here. I can't open up people's minds and know why they do what they do. I can only notice these patterns. And I think they're unfortunate too, because sometimes they lead to behavior that I actually do consider to be kind of prejudiced, being couched in woke rhetoric. Like when you referred to the indigenous rights activist I brought on my stream as being there to make me look right. And
so let me clarify there, because I wasn't aware that she had reached out to come onto the stream. I
maybe
guess
that's kind of important.
That it was the reverse, that like someone from the Discord had brought her on. But the fact, I was definitely like off the mark in that, and so that again, like my intent there was to say, like, and first I clarified, like, that is an objectively good thing to have happen. That perspective deserves to be there and should always be there. But like, and like this could be a moot point that you've talked with indigenous activists in the past before, as you showed. I again wasn't aware of that because I think you said the video had been privated, the other debate. But yes, it just struck me as like you could be calling this nitpicking, and that would totally be fine. But it struck me as odd that the immediate response to the Professor Flowers debate was the only time, aside from the privated video, that an indigenous activist had been brought on. And again, like you
brought Lance on. Lance speaks on indigenous issues quite a lot, disproportionate amount. He cares about them a lot.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's all good. I just wanted to clarify that was definitely not like that was an inference that I took that wasn't like correct, basically.
I get that. I just feel I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that in the convo that I had with the indigenous rights activists after Professor Flowers, the fact that she had approached me was something which was brought up in the conversation directly. So I can't expect you to watch all of my content. That would be a ridiculous burden of proof.
But he did say for you to watch all of Professor Flowers'
assumptions made betray biases. Even if I had reached out to her, is she just the token? Because she is an actual land back activist. I mean, like, actually involves... Professor Flowers is not. But
right.
in a sentence, her contribution, and you never really said or explained that she thought Professor Flowers said monstrously bad things, but in a sentence, her contribution was reduced to brought on to make the white man look good. And this is, of course, I mean, the C-O-O-N, this is the quintessential criticism of the turncoat.
Wait, can't he just say the word because he's on YouTube?
Black person, or I guess in this case, indigenous person. It's something that I've seen before from people who were very progressive on some issues and very lacking in others. And it's frustrating because it seems like in an effort to preserve the perceived legitimacy of Professor Flowers, you had to not only delegitimize the actual activist I brought on, you also had to not make it clear that she disagreed explicitly with Professor Flowers. You framed it as her coming on to teach me and my audience, which she did, don't get me wrong, but she messaged me because Professor Flowers said horrible shit. She wasn't the only one who emailed me either. I got professors from universities. That video got a lot of views, man. People took attention. And always the same, I can't believe these are the people representing land back activism, you know? Like, I can't believe Professor Flowers is the one people are going to think of. Something I had to struggle with too afterwards, you know, like people in my community. I feel like I have to do damage control for people I don't like. It's actually really like humiliating, you know, like I have to scamper around my community being like, guys, okay, they're not all that bad. Like, land back, it's a good thing. Like, it's I swear to God, like, land back activists aren't like this, you know, and I have to like massage it over, but I'm doing this for people I don't even like. So it's like, it's so frustrating. But I wish you would play the stuff she said about Professor Flowers.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, it was a mistake to frame her participation in that way, and I wouldn't. I mean, I would have changed that if I would have like thought that through. I kind of threw that in at the last minute, but I mean, with regards to
why does Vaush get the easy layup on this guy when he should have made a video about me first? This is bullshit. He's gonna end up not making the video about me now because he fucked this up so hard, and now I don't get the easy layup.
Forget, actually, I completely forget what you just said at the end. Oh, with regards to her perspective on the issue. I mean, yeah, again, like my disagreement is with the language, the inflammatory language that was being used around land back, right? And so, like, would you say that you elevating the land back rhetoric to a question of potential genocide, would you say that contributes to inflammatory rhetoric, or was that Professor Flower's fault?
No, she didn't. She didn't engage in any land back activists. She was the one promoting the genocide. That's not on me. I was trying to detach the two. By associating the two, she's the one causing harm to that movement. I feel like we have a moral obligation for the sake of indigenous people to push back against language like that, because the last thing indigenous people need is a bunch of, chest-puffing Twitter leftists running around screeching about how, if indigenous people want to ethnically displace their colonizers from centuries ago, then they should have the right to. Which is something you do see on Twitter from time to time, but I was surprised to see somebody stick to that position so adamantly while talking to me. I try to
agree
pull
with what
past
you just said,
it,
like I think like you said you try to pull past it. I mean, in what regard do you mean? Like pull past the narrative that like if you give people autonomy, then they want to do genocide?
I don't think that. I think that Professor Flowers wants to do it. I don't think indigenous or like people who have been freed want that. This is her problem. I said that in the thing too. I was very clear multiple times. I do not think that indigenous people or oppressed people are going to do that retributory violence. I told her to stop defending it, And that's one of the things the activist I talked to afterwards said. For God's sake, if you care about indigenous people, drop the bullshit Twitter posturing. Indigenous people do not want this like pseudo blood and soil like revenge fantasy LARP bullshit being thrown out alongside all the Ushanka wearing Soviet Union themed bass boosted YouTube montage playing dipshits who talk about all political issues like they're
hey, where's the Yeet pledge?
3 seconds away from taking to the street with a Kalashnikov. And I agree completely with that. In this respect, I feel like it's irresponsible rhetoric on Professor Flowers' behalf, which is causing harm to a minority group that gets, a very little time in the limelight as it is.
Okay. I mean, that's like, I don't disagree with what you said there, but I do disagree that I disagree with the conclusion from the debate being that is what she wants. And again, like, I don't think that was her point. We've already gone through this, but
man, it sure is easier arguing
to watch her videos on it. And I mean, if you really want to watch the debate, but I disagree with that foundation. But everything else, I completely agree with. Like, I don't think no one ever wanted to talk about these issues on that level. You bringing the activist on was really a really good thing. But ultimately, what I stand by is that I just don't think that is like what could be charitably construed from what she was saying. And again, you'll say like she said X, Y, Z, but I think like, do you think that in like, okay, you've had a few conversations with leftists that have gone wrong. I mean, obviously you've had ones that have gone right. What would you say causes that to happen? I mean, we talked about this before briefly, that you said it's an uncharitability and a framing of you as being antagonistic. Is that what you would say is
Godspeed,
what causes
Dino.
them?
I think the main issue is that they're wrong, but it's multiplied by that, yeah. Everyone's wrong on some issues. Not everyone can be, I don't know, like me. I'm posturing here.
Right, all the time.
We're all
no,
right.
I think that's like,
we're all
that's
wrong
one of
from
my
time to
favorite
time.
bits. That's one of my favorite bits is just the guy who's, I'm never wrong. I've never been wrong. I never will be wrong. And everything I say on Twitter is correct. All my takes are true. That's my favorite bit.
Anybody with my reputation had better have remarkably high self-esteem. With regards to how these conversations typically go wrong, I do think a lot of it is a narrative-based thing. The issue is that a lot of people do view me as some kind of big bad, scary antagonist a person who's representative of the rot in the online left, and also because people constantly talk about this alleged harassment from my community, a person who mobilizes this massive wave of hate that people will get after, which, again, I've seen the comments under Professor Flower's video. There are people who are angry at her. I didn't see anything I would characterize as harassment, and her subs have gone up. So
the fuck am I getting shot?
The industrial complex of anti-Vaushites, continues to produce to this day.
Yeah, thank you for that, by the way. My video's popping off.
Of course. But no, people perceive me as this villain, so they feel like kowtowing to me is going to be kowtowing to a bunch of associated positions that they don't agree with, So often, you did it in this conversation. There are a number of statements... Thank you.
I'm sorry, hold on, I need all my brain power.
There are a number of statements I could make which would be factually correct, which neither of us should shy away from because we're both educated enough to understand the positions which led to this, You can talk about, in a leftist space, with no fear whatsoever of being misconstrued, about crime statistics, about IQ averages, and I'm good at talking about these things because a lot of lefties leave them on the table. Too bad. They don't want to talk about it. It's a touchy subject. But when you look deeper into it, there's always reasons why, right? You get more educated on it, and all of a sudden, it just becomes...
Oh my god! Very rare. Based! Merrick. Take. Look, if your favorite video essayist goes on Twitter and lies to their teeth every 5 seconds while they're harassing people, I hate to break it to you, but they're probably lying in their amazing video essays too. Damn. Dumb, Daniel, dumb.